Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to address all of the questions that you had in the Q&A box as we go along. But I'd actually like to kind of practice what I preached in the slides and start with a poll, because I want to know your experiences of teaching online or studying online with or without a phone. So here goes. Okay, results are coming in fast. Thank you. Keep them coming. Okay, so I'll just give you about 10 more seconds to vote if you can. Most of you have by now, that's great. Okay, and I'm going to end that poll. Okay, so the results are in, very interesting. So I've got 60% of you have taught online before. Okay, so you know a lot of the things that I'm talking about and you're with me there. And 40% of you have taught with a phone and a computer. So a lot of people will have some familiar experiences to me, or maybe very different. Hopefully we'll discuss that. In terms of studying online, we've got a whole mix. 47% of you have studied online with a computer, only 7% from a phone. So I'd be very interested later on to hear what you think about studying online with a phone. And some with a mix. And which is easier? Yeah, I think teaching and learning online from a computer is certainly easier, as I mentioned in my slides. So I'll share these results with you now. You can have a little look yourself. And if anybody would like to comment on any of this right now, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can discuss. I think Nalika has raised her hand. Forgive me if my pronunciation's wrong.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's really interesting, your presentation, and I am definitely doing that at the moment. I'm teaching my learners from the computer, but I also have I'm using Teams as well. So I use the app, but I have the app there so that I can try and see some of the chats. So there's definitely a lot of multitasking going on. I've got a similar situation. A lot of learners maybe have this low income, so the phone is their only tool. And the challenges I've found are with internet connection more than anything. So I like the stages that you propose to us. I've been doing it more sort of, a live lesson the whole time.
And how have you found that in terms of your energy levels?
Yeah, it's been okay, but I guess I've given time for students to work on tasks. So yeah, it is strange having the silence, like you said, but I guess that is their time to just get on with the task and give them that time to ask questions if they need to. But the challenge is, I have to do things like with tasks. I ask them to work like in a race. So the first one to finish, let me know, raise your hand, that kind of thing. Which then helps the ones who are quicker, but obviously the ones who take longer, maybe it's not enough time for them. But yeah, I think for me, the biggest challenge is the connection. Definitely. A lot of people wanting to join the call, losing the connection. So lots of interruptions.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge, and I have that experience as well. I'm interested to know what do you often do with somebody who keeps repeatedly losing the connection? Do you kind of bite the bullet and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to remove you from the call for now because you're distracting. Please come back when your connection's better. Or do you just kind of grin and bear it and take it on with the class? How do you handle it?
Yeah, I guess because it's been all very new to it, I have sort of grin and bared it, and I've basically, I have sort of let them in. But if I'm finishing explaining something, then I do try to finish that point, and then I can see the person waiting to join the call. But I will just say to the group, "Oh, I need to let this person in. Bear with me."
I think that's a really good idea, and I think it's kind of like the class. I don't know about you, but I try to teach online as much as I would in the classroom as possible, in the sense that if somebody's knocking at my door, I will try in the classroom. I will try and just check finished what I was doing or check that everyone's okay before I greet that person and deal with them. And I think you can do that online as well. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Sounds like you're
exactly.
doing a
That's
good
what.
job though. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy at all. But yeah, it's interesting to hear the same sort of challenges that people are having. But I like the structure you've set up with the warmer independent study on a core consolidation. Yeah, I like that. So
That's
I
nice
might
to
try
hear. Thank you
that.
very much. Your Malika, your point reminded me of a question actually in the Q&A that I might just
Okay.
address now, if that's okay with everybody. Um, so thank you, Nalika. Somebody in the group was talking about latecomers as well. Let me just have a quick look. Yes, that was Heather. She said that timekeeping is a huge challenge for some learners. Do I have latecomers? And if so, what happens if a learner missed the preparation but wants to join the call? So this is a connection to what we were saying. So yeah, I would say to that, Heather, I do have latecomers all the time. As Malika said, that is a challenge. You mentioned you were an ESOL teacher as well. A lot of your learners, as I'm sure, same as mine, are struggling with very, very chopping and changing schedules. And they're dealing with a lot, particularly now when everyone's at home. And yeah, I have latecomers all the time. And if they are trying to enter the call, I will insist on I'll get them to say that they're there, either trying to enter the call or maybe on a channel, like a feed, like a chat like we're using now. And I will ask them privately, okay, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to catch up, look back at what we've been doing, have a look at the tasks. You don't have to produce anything, but catch up, and then I will let you in on the call, or then I will talk to you face to face. And I think that that's really good for transferable skills. A lot of my students are learning English because they want to get better jobs. And yeah, that does depend on everyone's context, but I think that would be the same on a work call. If someone was arriving late, you'd expect them to catch up before they joined. And going back to that word responsibility, I think, yeah, so Heather, I don't know if you have anything else to say on that.
Hi, Erin. I just want to say thanks for such a clear and a useful practical presentation. And so following on from my question about the latecomers, I think that's a really, just good idea to have them go back over the information. I was wondering about the tasks themselves, the asynchronous tasks. Well, they're synchronous but offline.
Yeah.
Do you find that obviously in ESOL we get some fairly spiky profiles where learners have different strengths and weaknesses? Obviously, like this is quite there's a lot of reading and writing. Do you find that some of your learners with weaker reading and writing skills, maybe those coming from first languages with different scripts, do they ever struggle to keep up?
Yeah, completely. And I agree with the spiky profiles comment. Yeah, some people are super fast. This is going back to what Nalika said about who finishes first, that kind of thing, which can be very rewarding, but can also, as you said, sometimes show the gap between learners, which is not problematic, but can be difficult in terms of timing sometimes, as well as maybe confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think the best thing to do really with that is, as I mentioned in my slides, I often don't get to the call until maybe the third stage. So when once we've had a warmer and then we are going into a task, I mentioned that I monitor, and I know which students will struggle with certain tasks. So I will check in, I'll send them a message. How are you going? How's it going? Do you need help with this? And also, as I mentioned in my slides, I know the students who are going to find some tasks much easier, so I can pop in with extra differentiation and kind of push them. So it's harder work for the teacher, but it's better for the students because it's individual teaching. And that's
Right.
what you don't have when you're on a camera, everybody together, because you don't have those private moments. When you're in a classroom, you can kind of go over kneel down and have a quick chat about something. And I think that's one advantage of using a phone. Like I said, it's born out of impracticality, that it's harder to be kind of live, everyone on a camera, but it's actually a kind of silver lining from this problem, that I can individually deal with students. I don't know if you find that.
So when you're doing that monitoring, would you just be sending them messages in private chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
And whether that's Teams or WhatsApp, as I mentioned, I wasn't allowed to use WhatsApp, and a lot of questions in the Q&A were about how I deal with my lessons in general on my course, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, I will use the private chat a lot, and I really feel strongly about the different kind of avenues for communication in these platforms. You can actually use that to your advantage, which you would not get if you were just on a video call or if you were in the classroom. So yeah, I've used the chat. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I'm happy to address any of those questions that were in the Q&A box, but I'm just wondering about the reflective questions that were put to some of you. Oh, thank you very much, Hedy. So if you just have a quick read in the chat box, everybody, you'll see 3 reflective questions that were kind of for us to consider before, during, or now. If you just have a quick read, and if anybody would like to comment on this, raise your hand. Okay, so there's one of those peaceful silences, hopefully not eerie, that I was talking about, to just give you a chance to read. So the first question, do you ever plan or deliver lessons on your phone? So I know a few of you have taught with your phone, but what about planning? Does anybody plan on their phone? Who wants to talk about that?
Erin, if I may just say something, it makes total sense to me that you should plan using your phone, because then you are actually experiencing what you want your student to experience. So, and when you talked about the scale problem, it makes a lot of sense. I remember having a student call me and say, "Teacher, this image that you selected for today's lesson was too small and I couldn't see it because I was on my phone." And again, I had never thought that I should try it out before I send it to my students. And now I'm going to do that from now on. So thank you very much for that tip.
No, that's good to hear. Thank you. It's one of those things that, people talk about common sense, but what is common sense? We don't know that it's a practical thing until we've tried it. So it's that kind of, getting into their shoes. I agree.
Yes.
Well, somebody has just popped something into the chat box. Michael, my only experience is when there is no alternative, when there's no planning is possible. Okay, so maybe, as I mentioned, it's not ideal. It's not the first choice for most people, but when there's no alternative, like I said, it's a difference between a lesson and no lesson, or planning, you're not in front of your computer. It might be a good way for us to move forward. Michael, if you do want to say anything else, just pop your hand up, but no worries if not.
It's usually just when there's no alternative. Either there's no internet or there's a storm. That's been the most usual one, if there's a storm and then the signal is really bad. So
okay.
But I only teach adults, so it's and individual classes for adults, so it's not the most difficult situation.
Okay, I mean, I only teach adults as well. I have taught kids in the past, but not for years. Although teaching on a phone with kids could be easier in some ways, because obviously children are so amazing with devices, in the handheld ones. But yeah, I guess it depends on what type of adult you're teaching as well. That context is very important. And yeah, if you don't have a need to do it, this topic might seem a bit strange, but hopefully, like you said, you might be better able to do it in an emergency. So that's a good thing to take away as well. Rosa said, I don't plan on my phone, but I use it for homework, especially for speaking and pronunciation. My students also send me their homework via WhatsApp, and I use the edit tools to correct it. Oh, I'm a big fan of using edit on my phone as well. Rosa, you don't have to speak, but do you have anything else you want to say on that?
Not necessarily, just to thank you, because both my students have phones, but I use a laptop. And I was unaware that my face would probably look really distorted on their phones, because I do pull a lot of faces.
Okay.
But no, thanks very much. That's why I tuned in. It was also to get a feel of what they're experiencing. And I think now just practice myself and send myself my own lessons from my laptop to my phone to see what it actually looks like.
Oh, great! I love a practical tip. That's brilliant. That's really good to hear. And yeah, don't worry about students seeing close-ups of your eyebrows. I'm sure they've seen every close-up of my face possible on their phones.
Now I know why they laugh.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you. I've got another. Heather, you've raised your hand again. Is that an old hand or a new hand?
All right. So just regarding, I've occasionally delivered like part of my lesson from my phone, because if if I need to message a learner, I'll be doing most things from my laptop. But if I need to message a learner, I might do that on my phone, or send a quick instruction via my phone if that will be faster for whatever reason. But generally, like, I've never done planning from my phone, because I rely on Microsoft Word and PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And I find that those are quite fiddly on my phone. So I was just wondering what you mean exactly by planning on your phone, because I think obviously it's great if we can do things from the learner's perspective.
Yeah, no, really good point. If I'm honest, I think so. I mentioned in the details for this webinar and a little bit in the slides. For me, the online teaching journey started last March. It's been about a year now because of everything that's happened globally. But even before that, even when I was teaching 100% face-to-face, I would always plan my lessons on my phone on the way to work. Sounds a little bit last minute. It's not that I was being lazy, but I like to get into the work frame of mind as I'm going to work. And
yeah.
And I would plan. I'd research. So I'd kind of scroll through things, find images, things genuine text that I might want to edit or create readings from. Again, with listening, I find YouTube much easier to use on my phone. I don't know if this is a personal thing, a generational thing. I love my laptop, but I do feel very comfortable with my phone, and I know that a lot of people don't. In terms of the fiddliness, I recommend, so when I'm on my laptop, I often do use the Microsoft Suite, including Teams and PowerPoint and all that. When I'm on my phone, I usually use Google. So I use Google Slides, Google Keep. They're much easier for me personally to use on my phone. So if I wanted to create a quick PowerPoint that I was going to project even on the way to work, when I used to teach face-to-face, I'd use Google Slides off my phone. It's much less fiddly than Microsoft. Nowadays, because I'm kind of multitasking, as Nalika mentioned at the beginning, and you said about chatting with students while you're operating, I do usually have one hand on my phone and another on the laptop. And it depends on the platform or the channel of which I'm communicating. I find the chat easier to just quickly do while I continue with what I'm doing on my big screen. So yeah, it's more of a practical thing, but I really do find Google to be much better on your phone than Microsoft.
Okay, great. That's great. I'm gonna try. So is that Google Slides and Google Keep, did you say?
Yeah, Google Slides,
great.
Google Keep, and also Google Docs as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna check out all of that. Thanks very much.
No worries. Okay.
Erin?
Yes.
Sorry, can I just one question? Because I'm
yeah.
listening to this and it's actually quite interesting. You know, I'm thinking, you just said for listening practice, you like to use YouTube, right? But
yeah.
You know, I'm thinking, you can't really use coursebook materials, right? So every single activity, every single listening activity has to be designed by you. So you have to listen to the text, you need to design the questions, etc., etc., etc. That's a lot of time, right? I mean, how do you do a listening activity? This is really my question. Like, do you ask students to listen to the text in their own time and answer the question, and then the questions, and then that you bring them together and you just do feedback? Or do you read out a particular text when everybody's online? How do you go about teaching, practicing listening skills?
Okay, yeah. So it's quite a few questions there. So just
I
to
know.
kind of,
So,
no. In a very interesting way. I'm just going to unpick them as you said them. So if I remember correctly, in terms of coursebook versus you making your own materials, I'll be honest, I'm not a massive coursebook lover. Because I have often found that I have to adapt them so much to meet my learners' needs, not even in terms of level, but often in terms of culture. I find course books can be quite binary at times, quite restrictive, not always, and I do have some that I will use, but I'm often adapting so much and looking for links to their life and why they're learning English that I find it easy to create my own. That said, I don't want my students always to be listening to my voice or always have questions from my perspective. So with my colleagues, I often ask them to record something. I might send them a transcript and say, can you just record this and ping it into my email or WhatsApp? And I also ask my friends and family who are not teachers as well, a genuine question, get them to record it and use that as authentic listenings as well. In terms of whatever text I've got or audio I've got, whether it's from a course book and published or something authentic or from YouTube, the way I do it is I have had students listen where I've shared my audio on a live call like now, but they often have connection issues. And some people don't hear it in the same way. There's sometimes a delay. Volume buttons can cause issues, as simple as that sounds. Some people are kind of, oh, it's too loud, and others are struggling to turn it up, depending on how old their phone is. So that has worked for me a few times, but I've tried to avoid that. What I tend to do, if we go back to my kind of recommended lesson sheet, and I do mix this up, it's not a set menu, but I will usually put the listening into a channel that I'm using. So we greet, okay, we're going to do a listening first. Here's a listen. I might ask an initial question, like, what do you think would be the best title for this listening? Or are you listening to somebody in this country, or this country, often with a poll? And that's my gist question. And then I'll say, okay, listen again. Here are your 10 comprehension questions. You have got 25 minutes to write those down on a piece of paper, and then you're going to come onto a call live. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms and you're going to discuss that together. But it's essential that you've made your notes on paper so that you can have the phone, talk to each other, and just quickly look at your notes. And that's the same for reading, listening, writing, and speaking preparation as well. Whatever skill it is, I will often do the same. Okay, so back to the reflection questions. I'm just thinking.
Sorry, 1 second. Yes, Nanika has something to say.
Sorry, Nanika, I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, just following on from what you were saying, Erin. Just about reading practice. Yeah, I just wanted to understand what sort of materials you use for reading. Is it that you're using Google Documents, or are you creating your own text and then sharing that with the learners? Just to understand a bit more about how you go about those tasks when they're in that independent study stage.
Yeah, so I'll use a range of techniques. Again, if I just use the listening as an example, if it was a YouTube video, I would post the YouTube video and my own questions that might be a list of questions on a note app like Google Keep, where you write your shopping list. I'll change the color to bright green so it looks nice. I'll take a screenshot and I'll pop that into the channel. It also means that it's on the scale of their phone. With reading, I might, if I was using a course book, because sometimes I do, I might screenshot that either off my phone so I can see that it's clear. Sometimes I might use my laptop as well, so snipping tool, something like that.
Yeah.
I'll obviously put the rights in the publication so they know where it's from, and then I will write my questions underneath. Sometimes I might edit with color as well. Again, I might do that on my phone. I might do that on my laptop. Convert it into a PDF, so then they can't overwrite it, because that can cause issues, and then I'll pop it into the channel. And
Okay.
and in terms of me creating my own materials, like I said, it's not for everybody. But again, I don't want it to always be from my perspective, because that means I'm sometimes overgrading or making it too pigeonholed, and they're not getting the practice they might need, and they're not getting a challenge that they might get from a text in a course book. But I often do create my own. That's my preference. Yeah, find it quicker.
Yeah. I mean, what I've been doing is, when I've been using the textbook, I've been screen sharing. So then I'm using my laptop. So obviously, the user experience might be different on the phone.
Screenshots, that's what I do. And again, if you've got
yeah.
a time limit, then you're still controlling it. You know, they've only got a certain amount of time off camera before we come on a call. So it's the same as you sharing it on a screen, on a Zoom call or whatever, and then saying, okay, right, now we're going into the questions. But they've got the advantage of not using their bandwidth, you know, not using their data if they don't have an internet connection. And they've got that time to just kind of chill a bit and get on with it, like they would in the class. They're not all staring at you at the board when they're doing a reading. And that's the kind of analogy that I might use.
Do you find, if you know, when we were talking about latecomers, do you find that some of the students come in on the call not having done the preparation work? And how do you sort of work with that?
I definitely do. If it's a bunch of them, I might put them into a breakout room together, and I will give them a kind of a brief version. But as I said to Heather, I think it was before, I will insist on them announcing that they are in the class in a written way on a channel first. I can spot that. If I'm on my laptop doing a call, I can see that it's on my phone. Oh, this person's just turned up. I'll send them a message, continue with the call, and when it's been 10 minutes or so, I'll let them in. I'm quite firm with that, because I think if you're late, you need to do the work to make up for it. If you can't do the work, and again, this goes back to connection issues. If somebody is, if there's bad connection issues, or they've not been able to do the work, or something's gone wrong, I will, as we're doing here on this webinar, I will let students listen. Cameras off, listen to it, and then I might check in with them after the lesson. What did you take home from it? Is everything okay? Do you think we can get you running back up to normal next time? You know, why were you late? What's going on? And that's the more pastoral side and the more classroom management side, I think, really.
Okay, yeah. It's great.
That's all right. I'm just going to move on, because there's quite a few questions in the Q&A.
How do you deal with error correction? Because that's, I mean, again, I've been listening to you and I'm thinking, do you kind of send a text message to individual students, or do you bring them together and you have some kind of a delayed feedback session? How do you provide feedback?
I do both of those things. And again, I will treat the online classroom as much as I can like the face-to-face classroom as possible, because it's a way that people already know. So students are used to having individual feedback privately, feedback in small groups, and feedback as a big group, and that can be live or it can be delayed. So for example, with delayed correction, just like in the classroom, if I was hovering around the tables monitoring, I'll do that in the breakout rooms, and I will get some kind of data on those students, write it down, and I might present that on a document, give them 10 minutes to have a look. I'll end the call, give them 10 minutes to have a look at that, make notes again, going back to the pen and paper, bring them back onto a call, put them in groups to discuss and correct that together before I give my final clarification on that. If it's individual, they're giving me writing or something discrete, like answers to a grammar exercise or a vocabulary exercise, a gap fill, I will screenshot the message and I will edit it with a pen, so tick across, or I will write like...
is it easy to elicit self-correction or peer correction, or is it always kind of your correction? I mean, that really is the thing that I can't visualize.
Okay, so with self-correction, I'm not always going to tell them what's wrong. I'll just say, this is wrong. Have a think about it for 5 minutes and come back to me. And with peer correction, again, when they are working in small groups, they've got that opportunity to peer correct. And again, if it's delayed, they're working together to correct their own mistakes as a team. So I'm hoping I'm explaining it clearly enough, but for me, there is no difference between the way that we do it in a classroom and the way that we do it online.
I can see that. Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, good. But I'm sure there are differences that I'm not aware of now, because I've kind of got used to it. And feel free to point those out, and I'll have a kind of reflection on that. But in general, when I was thrust into this in March, I just thought, I've never done this before. How am I going to do it? And I thought, I'll just do what I do with my learners. I know what I know. I'm going to try and build on that. And I treat it like it's the classroom, but it's digital.
Yeah. Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to go back to the reflective questions again. I'm just going to put the last 2 in. Again, no worries if you don't have anything to say on either of these questions. But if there is anything you'd like to bring up now, I've just popped those questions back into the chat box. So how do you feel after a non-stop hour or more of video call? I mean, we're coming up to that now. How can you apply that to your learners' needs? And how have you had to adapt? It sounds like a lot of you already have jumped into online teaching in the last year as well. Is there anything anyone would like to share on either of those points? Malika, yeah?
Hi, I was just going to say, I think it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, when you are teaching, it's difficult to have breaks when you are on a video call. So that's why I think I was interested in this idea where you are not online for the whole call, where you actually give the learners that time to do that independent study and sort of have that time off camera. I think with my learners, they've been camera shy. So most of them have their cameras off, even though I have my camera on. So that's something I think still need to work on to try and get them to feel more comfortable. But maybe, like you said, it's the idea that they don't want to be on camera for the whole lesson. So maybe if I do introduce this idea of having the call to go over through the task, maybe they'll be more receptive to the idea of being on camera.
Possibly. I think in terms of energy levels and processing levels, it all works in your and their favour. But, it's not for everybody. A lot of people want to see you at all times, and they want to be seen. And it can be restrictive, but again, it was born out of necessity. Some of my colleagues are on the course. So my lessons, and I'll talk about this in a moment because there are quite a lot of questions in the Q&A box about my course or my students and how I deal with these things. But in general, a lot of my colleagues who do the same job as me, who are thrust into online learning, we do classes that are 3 hours long and we don't have a choice in that. So this is also something to think about. There's no way that I will be on a call for 3 hours. I'm not comfortable with that. So it's also a personal choice. And when I've explained this to colleagues, just in passing, they've suddenly gone, oh, okay, yeah, of course I don't need to be on a call face to face for 3 hours. That's a good point. So it might not be for you, but if you try it, you might come around to it and it might be better for them. But I will say that I still have students who refuse to turn their camera on. So that's not you, that's everybody.
Yeah.
Okay then. Right, I might move on if that's okay, Malika.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all your points, and I'm glad that I'm not alone in this, that you've had similar experiences. So it sounds like a lot of us have adapted a lot in the last 12 months because of everything that might have happened where we're from. I've just got a point from somebody else. You like it that I break the lesson into chunks with different interaction. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, if we think about this session, okay, it's not a lesson, but we're online and we had input where our cameras were off and we all had time to process that, think of questions, and then now you're asking me, which is kind of what I'm suggesting as a route to your future lessons. We're not necessarily on phones, but again, it just breaks it up. And again, in a classroom, I would never stand at the board for the entire lesson. And for me, standing at the board is represented by being on the camera with them the whole time. So a webinar is definitely different to a class, of course, but it's just another way of looking at it, I guess. Okay. Anything else to share on how we have adapted in the last 12 months? Heather's raised her hand again. I'll take this as the last one, and then we'll move on to the Q&A.
Erin, you've mentioned breakout rooms a few times, and I'm just thinking about my learners on Zoom. I do a similar thing to you, where we're offline and online, and it's and then we're online, but we're not on a call, and then we go on a call. Okay. But when we get online, we probably do about 2 hours with a 15-minute break. Yep. And so I get tired and they get tired, and the break is really refreshing. I always remind them to step away from the screen, and I'm not sure if all of them do, but I find that when they go into to breakout rooms towards the end of the lesson, because there is a degree of sort of independent, someone has to manage the conversation, and when they're all flagging a bit, and there is also the disadvantage of online teaching is that I always give them some questions to copy beforehand, so that when they go into breakout rooms, there's something to guide them through whatever task they're doing in there. I was just wondering if in breakout rooms, do you have any problems with direction or exhaustion just because they've been on a call for or they've been studying, not just on a call, but they've been studying online for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, I do have problems with that. You know, my slides were quite light-hearted in the sense that I mentioned, you know, funny, embarrassing things where people send messages in publicly, or they show a picture of their phone, of their ear, sorry, because they're holding the phone the wrong way. But there are tricky sides, negative sides as well. The late coming can be because students think they can, because it's not real, because you're not in the room. That can be tricky. People can be tired through no fault of their own. Like you said, people can be tired because of external influences, and people can completely coast and let a student dominate, and it's not fair. I monitor carefully and closely, and I will kind of boost people. And this reminds me of a question on the Q&A, Heather, which is linked. One person asked about how I group my students. And I do group my students with level, but also personality, also with their willingness to lead. And I will always refresh the groups if I'm doing a breakout call, or refresh the groups if they're working as peers in a kind of asynchronous way, to mix up that dynamic. And also going back to what I said with etiquette, timekeeping is an important thing. And another thing that you might add to that list is the effort that you have to put in, because we are a team and we have to do this together. But again, that's really the same as a face-to-face classroom, I think, although we do get more tired on a screen. So Zoom fatigue, somebody put in the box earlier in the chat box. So yeah, I hope that answers the question in a way. Okay, so we're kind of running out of time almost. I'm just going to go to the Q&A questions. I can see, the Q&A box. I can see that a few of them have been answered. So I'm just going to focus on the ones here. So establishing boundaries with students, that's a really good point. I just mentioned with Heather that I try my hardest to kind of monitor and also to build a strong rapport I mentioned in the slides to build a community, and I just mentioned again the etiquette that I kind of insist on. And I have to reinforce that constantly. I do. And that's culturally speaking as well. My students are from all different places in the world, and we can rub each other up the wrong way sometimes culturally, but we're working together as a team. So I will say to them, you know, please don't contact me outside of these hours. Our classes are at this time, but you can contact me in the morning until class, but not after. But students always will. Again, going back to what I said on the slides, top tip, you need to mute. You need to manage your notifications. I often, in fact, every weekend, I delete the app that I use to teach Teams off my phone. I delete the app and then I reinstall it on the Monday. It's also good for your phone. But yeah, I just kind of black it out. And then in terms of them contacting me, I don't notice because I don't have any notifications. I only notice it when I open the app. So that's one thing that I'd say. It didn't have a name on that question, so I hope whoever asked has got an answer that they think is okay there. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Again, it's anonymous, but it is, how many hours should a course last with this method? Is it an ongoing project until it dies out, or should we establish an end right when we start? Okay, so there are a few questions all about me teaching online and my course. Just to say, I have only been teaching online for a year, and that was born out of necessity because my face-to-face classes were 100% and they went 100% online. And then that's fluctuated over the year depending on what's happening. My employer dictated the times that I taught, and the ways that I taught in terms of not using WhatsApp. I wasn't allowed to use that. For how long the course lasts, well, I've been doing it since March. So I work at a college that runs from September to July, and it's lasted this long for me, with a mix of 100% online and then 50-50 face-to-face and online. I don't think there's a time limit on it really, but again, it's not the most ideal way of teaching. I never said that, but it's been born out of necessity, and I've found this is the best route through. So depending on what happens, I could be teaching this way for a very long time. Another question that this reminded me of was somebody asked about mayhem. How many students would you recommend? Again, this was dictated to me by my employer. I had a maximum of 24 students in my class. And as you can imagine, everybody saying hello, sending an emoji 24 times can be chaotic. If I could choose, face-to-face or online, I think the golden number for a group class is 8 students. It allows for pair work, it allows for really good individual feedback from you, and if somebody is sick, you've still got people left. But that's in a dream world, and usually that never happens. So I don't think there's a time frame on this. I don't think there's a group of students as a restricted number on this. It's not something that I'm selling as a perfect way forward. This is how I've coped, this is how I've adapted, and how have you adapted? That's what I mean. Okay, I've just got 2 more questions in the Q&A. So what's the name of the polling app I've just used? So this was from Rosa. This was a poll on Ring Central meetings, and it's just a feature at the bottom, and you can get that on Zoom as well. In my slides, I mentioned a poll on Teams. So there, depending on your what membership you have or what access you have, you can get this on all of them, but I recommend it. And finally, Alexandra asked, how do I bring learners closer together when they're not in the same room? Okay, so I think when we are online, there can be a tendency to maybe not bond as well, which creates issues of maybe not pulling your weight, which is why I suggested this lesson shape where you've got a certain amount of responsibility and a lot of monitoring, as I mentioned before, just to make sure that the dynamic's right and that no one's too dominant or too passive. But to bring people closer together, I think use whatever you're using in a semi-professional, semi-formal way. Bombard students with GIFs or GIFs, however you say it, emojis, pictures, sounds, images, videos, and get them to do the same. You know, I always start my class with, hey, click reply and say, hey, everybody, and an emoji, but that always changes. It could be, hey, classmates, and an emoji of a freezing face if it's snowing outside. That creates a little bit of fun. It will often get someone suddenly posting a picture of a snowman that they built, that kind of thing. It's a really nice warmer. It's what we do in the classroom. So getting students to share. When cameras are on, it's a window into the world that we live in that you don't get in the classroom. If you're face-to-face in a classroom, you only bring yourself and your possessions that you have that day. But when you're at home, however blank the background might be, you might notice plants. People might talk about the plants that they have, that they're looking after. Use the fact that people are stuck at home, or maybe not stuck at home, but opting to work or study from home. And use that to your advantage, because you don't get that face-to-face. So again, just it's not always the most ideal way, but use everything that you can to, flip the situation, basically. Look at the positives, look at the silver linings, bring people closer that way. You've got an environment around them that you wouldn't normally have. Use that to your advantage.
Do you find it easier, like perhaps there are certain levels that you find easier to teach with a phone? Like say in the classroom, we find certain levels more difficult to teach and some levels easier to teach. Now, how does it feel when you teach with a phone? Like say you have a group of beginners. I mean, how difficult it is?
I think that it is often more difficult to teach lower levels on a more challenging device. That's true. But I think that it intersects with people's digital skills and their knowledge of this. So, for example, I teach 3 classes in my current job this way, which would kind of represent pre-intermediate and intermediate and almost upper. So I don't have any beginners at the moment. The upper intermediates are often easier to teach because it flows easier. We don't interrupt each other so much.
They always are, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
However, some of those students really struggle with digital skills. So even though the lesson's flowing once they're into it, they get lost in cyberspace, their connection goes, they can't find the Zoom code again. And it's an intersection between the two.
So really, it's how advanced you are in terms of using technology. I mean, that's the key here. Not your level as in your English level, but your level as in how well do you know how to use technology. That's the difficulty.
Yeah, it's definitely a factor.
Yeah, and your experience again, I mean, do you often get people who just simply don't know how to use technology, and then how do you help them?
I help them slowly, carefully, with frustration at times. This is part of the reason that so much of my preferred lesson shape is off camera, so that I can monitor. When I monitor, I don't just mean academically in a teaching sense, but I'm monitoring troubleshooting issues. So those people who need extra support will get a little call from me, will get more screenshots with more arrows saying that this is the mute button, remember when you press this, we can hear you, we can't hear you, that kind of thing. So yeah, I do have to support people a lot, and some people are absolutely fine. So it's just differentiation on a different level, I